Hey, Kent.
Hey, Dean.
Welcome to episode 128. Tell folks a little bit about you.
So I live in Southern California in an area called Orange County, Newport Beach specifically. I've been in direct to consumer product marketing for about 25 years now.
Oh,
I entered that space not as a marketer, though. I entered the space as a chief financial officer. And I was what was referred to as an operational chief financial officer. So I managed the business in conjunction with the CEO.
hmm
And one of those companies, actually the very first in the space, we took that company from about 20 million to 150 million inside of a year and a half. And I kind of fell in love with direct to consumer marketing. So it fed my creative side of messaging and advertising and ad creation, and then it also fed my analytical side of numbers and how do we put things together and measure them and optimize them and refine them and things like that. And so I kind of fell in love with it. And about 5 years into that journey, I decided, you know what, I built up a lot of experience with my marketing teams over the different course of different companies I was working at. And
right.
I said, you know what, there's a void that's out there in the marketing space at that time. So we're in the early 2000s. And I decided to really jump into that space to help a lot of brand companies bring their products to market. And at that time, we are heavily involved in television marketing. It was pre-digital transformation. So television was the 800-pound gorilla, which I still argue it is today, but we could get into that later. But anyways, that's a little bit about my background.
Okay, so here's my hypothetical then.
All right, fire
Um,
away.
you've been hired as a fractional chief marketing officer. Okay. And today's date, it's going to be a 1 year engagement, fractional, but 1 year. And today's day one, right? What do you try to make sure you do or get done in, let's say, the first 3 months of that 1 year engagement?
So the first 3 months, what goes through my head is really kind of a mantra. So understanding that chief financial officer structured in the way I think, I like to chunk things together. I approach kind of everything in the same manner, which is I ask a ton of questions. I then make decisions based on those questions. I analyze those results and then I kind of, refine or, I rinse and repeat and do that process over and over again because on day one, it's not my first conversation with these executives that have hired me and brought me into the organization. They've already had a bunch of conversations with me. They've told me their pain points. They've told me what their goals are. They've said what some of the challenges they've incurred or encountered with their marketing department or the results of the marketing department, which is usually why you're being brought in, is because of results we needed to change
Right.
here. And so that asking a lot of questions is insanely important for the process because you find out when you have conversations with everybody in the marketing department or the agencies you're using, when you start asking questions with regards to the goals and what are the challenges, why are we not meeting the goals, what are our roadblocks, you uncover a lot of things at different levels and different perspectives. And a lot of times you uncover things that really might go against what the executives want you to do in order to reach the goals. I'll give you an example of that. I was brought into a company, and one of the things that the two co-founders, co-CEOs, told me was, "We want you to replace the digital agency. We're spending about 150,000 with them a month. We're not getting an ROI on them. We've been with them for a year and a half. We want to bring it all in house." And so I'm like, okay, neat idea. I start asking questions and start uncovering things at the granular level. And I find out, well, really, the agency is built with a lot of smart people on this account. And so, it's not for lack of knowledge in the marketing space and their specialty and their segments. It was really a lack of goals and a lack of structure from the company to the agency. So what we did is we went through a process of developing margin allowables so that we understood what our KPIs were. We
Right.
then set those goals in place in each one of the segments of the digital agency, whether it be email marketing, SEO, SEM, programmatic, you name it. Each one had a separate KPI goal that we needed to reach and that we wanted to stretch for. Once we put those in place, within 2.5 months, a really relatively short period of time, we're able to return on our investment. And not only that, we were able to grow. And so the agency stayed in place. And one of the reasons it was important for this company also is because the company was relatively small. I only had an in-house team of myself and maybe two full-time employees. So we're able to leverage their bandwidth and make it profitable. But that only came from asking a lot of questions, making a decision, analyzing those results, and then repeating it through a refinement process.
In the first few months, yeah. All right.
Yeah, in the first
That's
few
that,
months.
that-
So,
that's all right. That's a solid process. Hey, okay. So, hi, Rose. How are you? Sorry.
Hello, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Rose. So, tell folks a little bit about you, and then I want to ask you the inverse of the question that I just asked. Okay.
Sure. So I am a fractional CMO for
Mhm.
B2B businesses. I work with service-based businesses and also B2B SaaS companies. My background is kind of varied, so it blends into this very nice merger of things. So I
Mhm.
ran a brand agency a few years ago, and also my corporate career was in digital transformation, and I was a tech entrepreneur as well. So those things like they create a nice merger for me to help my clients essentially bring this innovative way to marketing and this unified approach to marketing. So I work with companies that are at the stage where they've gotten a fair amount of success, but they reach a level where they're stuck. They're not sure quite where to go from there, and so sometimes they're doing like spaghetti marketing. They're hiring an agency here.
Right.
They're having a random SEO person there, or the owner thinks that they need to do XYZ in order to get the growth, but they're not really seeing the return on their investment. So I help them figure out, where are they trying to go? How can we put all the pieces together to get there? So not just marketing, but also how does that work downstream from the branding? Is your brand robust and effective? And also from there, it's your sales process working effectively? How is your operations working? What does your team look like? Or are there silos? So really, what I call myself is a fractional CMO because that's what people are more familiar with. But I'm
Sure.
really a growth Sherpa and a strategic partner to CEOs to help them think about how to unify their business when they're growing.
So, let me ask you this then. I'm going to ask you. It's the same hypothetical. New engagement, 1 year long. Today's day one. New client. Okay. I want to ask you like sort of the inverse of that other question, which is this: what do you try to avoid in the first 90 days of a brand new engagement?
That's a great question. So usually when I first start an engagement, the founder thinks they know what they need and they say go.
Mhm.
But we have to take a step back to figure out, okay, what is the real problem here? So a big part of what I do when I first start an engagement is just figure out what the root cause of the actual issue is. Why aren't you seeing a return on your investment? Why have you made the decisions that you've made in the past? And what is leading to that. So I first try to understand what is the root cause, and I bring a ton of tools from my career when I was doing digital transformation. Something called something that I do to map out the entire process, the entire to just give them a lot of visibility into exactly the steps that they're doing and what's unnecessary or where the sticking points are. So once I do that, I also try to understand where are they really trying to go, because sometimes they tell you they're trying to achieve X, but what they really need, what they're trying to achieve is Y. So I try to understand also where are they trying to go, what is the vision, what is the goal, and just to bring the team together to get them excited on the journey. There's a bit of change management aspect to it as well, because when a new person comes into a team, so as a CMO, you're a decision maker. So the team is not just going to say, okay, yeah, whatever you say, but you have to do some educating and some change management as well to get the team on the same page.
Okay, so let me ask you this then. Um, so I'm the CEO of your client's company, okay? And it's day one. We've had discussions, but today's your official day one. So I would say to you in our first like one-to-one meeting, it's 9 a.m. in the morning, I say, hey, so you've worked with a lot more CEOs than I've worked with CMOs, just from the nature of what you do versus what I do. So what should I stop doing or start doing as the CEO so that the company gets maximum value out of your time here?
That's another great question. So, one of the things that I see a lot is, especially when the company is at the growth stage, so they
Mm-hmm.
think their model in their mind of what they need to do is kind of how a corporate structure works. So, you have this department over here, that department over there, and everyone's kind of so they're growing their team, but still people are in silos. So,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing that I try to work with the CEO to help them figure out is that first the silos have to break down and we have to work as a unified unit. So part of what I bring to companies is this mindset of agility, like to implement agility into their business and to think of their growth journey like an experiment, like an agile experiment, basically. So there's a fine balance between long term planning and also being agile and being able to reflect on what you're doing to see whether it's working and
Right.
to figure out what the solution is. So what I tell them to stop doing is to stop making decisions based on hunches. Because a lot of CEOs do that as well. They say, "Oh, well, I've seen this somewhere. Oh, my business owner friend told me this will work, or I heard about this new thing. Let's do that." And they kind of expect their teams to kind of go and run with it without really realizing what is the strategy? What am I really trying to do? How can I bring all of the pieces together? Is that the best way to do it? Just because it works for someone over there, does that mean will it work for my business? So a lot of bad habits that I try to help them break is not being data driven, um, overcoming shiny object syndrome, and breaking down the silos that they have within their companies.
And Kent, how about you? What do you try to avoid in the first like 30 days? Or I should say, what do you want the CEO to either start doing or quit doing? Especially if the CEO thinks they're in charge of marketing. What do you want them to quit doing so that the company will like maximize on your strengths and mute and not mute them?
Definitely. I think one of the things I try to, you can never tell a CEO, especially a founder, stop doing this. You can encourage them and move them in a direction. And one of the things I see over and over and over again is exactly what Rose just talked about, which is a shiny object syndrome, because they're talking to peers out there, and their peers are saying, "Hey, this is working for me. That's working for me." And so what I tell everybody, it's the same thing with advertising. When you see your competitors, advertising in a certain space, or
Mm-hmm.
doing something in a certain manner, everybody's like, I must do that. And it's like, well, no, let's be aware of what that is. Let's look at what we're doing now. Let's see if that fits in with our goals and our strategy, and most importantly, our tactics. And then let's see what the results tell us to do. So we get a lot of shiny object situations like that. So we, obviously encourage them to, hey, let's focus on us, not on the competition. Let's be aware of them. But more than anything, one of the things I learned early on in my career, going back to being a chief financial officer, was tell me everything. I need to know everything. I need to know the good. I need to know the bad. Whatever that means, I need to know it. I have to have transparency. Do
Right.
not handcuff me. Otherwise, I may not get you the results that you desire because of information you're holding back on me. So that's something I really try hard to open up with people is, I need to know what's going on, because what I'm going to do is, when I uncover some bad things, usually, we say they're bad things, they're opportunities. So how do we change the opportunity? I'm going to speak to my executive immediately about that situation, because you've got to overcome challenges immediately before you can get to some of the good stuff. So it's having that open conversation, and it flows both ways. And if you have that, you become more of a team. And one more thing I'll put in there is stop assuming your employees know the goals that you have in your mind. If you haven't put them on paper, if you don't meet with them on a regular basis, if you do not strategize towards your goals or measure your goals, if you're not doing weekly meetings as a team and one-on-one with your key personnel, don't assume they know what's in your head, because
Right.
they don't.
Um, Ken, I'm going to ask a fill in the blank question. I like this question. The next question is also a fill in the blank question.
Okay.
I like these because there's almost no work for me, and you guys have the hard part. So here we go. Uh, Many clients just don't understand.
Many clients just don't understand the fundamentals of marketing.
Mm,
And they think that it's purely art, and that this art is something new now. And they forget the science part of it and
mhm,
the measurability. But if you go back and look at the fundamentals, or some of the, we'll say founding fathers, and I speak from direct to consumer businesses. Roses B2B, but a lot of it overlaps here. If you look back at some of the voices back 100 years ago, like John Caples and Claude Hopkins, and what they were talking about is incredibly applicable
mhm.
today. But we've evolved in our technology in how we deploy these methods, but how we get somebody's attention, how we speak to them, tell them our unique selling propositions, encourage them to purchase a product, and then build a relationship with them. Those fundamentals were done way back 100 years ago. They were just doing them through, periodical advertising, newspaper advertising, things like that. So that's something I think a lot of people don't realize, and they don't spend enough time understanding that structure. And they just jump in thinking that it's marketing is some newfangled thing that happened in the last 5 years.
Yeah, there's an advertising guy, Rory Sutherland, who I heard him on a podcast once. He says advertising is the longest running, best funded psychology experiment in human history.
Very well said.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
Rose, how about you? Many clients just don't understand what?
Well, how to make strategic marketing decisions,
Yeah.
meaning that they think, or they've been told that you spend 6 to 7% of your budget on marketing, and then they find the first marketing person they can find to throw that money at, or different people to throw that money at, but they don't understand the what's involved in it. And I speak from the B2B context, because a lot of it is really about building trust and building thought leadership. So there's a lot of branding that goes into it as well.
Right.
And they also don't understand the differentiation, how marketing is different from branding, and why they need to focus on that as well. And why marketing is different from sales, and how they need to focus on that as well. So marketing is kind of like a buzzword and like a nebulous term that I found to a lot of CEOs. They don't really know what that means, or what's involved, or what's included. And the last thing that I'll add is that they also don't understand the numbers, right? They a lot of times they wonder why they're not getting a return on their investment. Or I've seen this so many times, that where I first come in and the business was working with a marketing agency previously, and then they show me these reports from the marketing agency that the marketing agency is telling them, oh yeah, the campaign is doing great. And then I look at the numbers and I'm like, what is the benchmark? Do you understand what the industry benchmark is, to have something to compare it to, rather than just getting numbers thrown at you? On the flip side of that is that they also don't understand that sometimes the benchmarks are ridiculously low, and that's just what is expected and what is normal in the industry, but they don't quite understand that. So for example, I had a business owner tell me, oh, I have X amount of thousand followers on LinkedIn. why aren't all of my followers seeing my post on LinkedIn? I'm like, well, that's not quite how it works.
No.
So I have to break down the benchmarks. This is how it works to try to help them understand the numbers. And from those numbers, being able to use them to figure out, okay, this is what we need to focus on next to maximize the value of what we're doing with marketing.
Right. All right, let me ask you this then. It's a shift. We're going to talk about fractional CMOs. Someone who became a fractional CMO today, would be surprised that what?
Hmm. Well, I think the big thing is that you have to, like, they would be surprised how much of an entrepreneur you do have to be.
Mm-hmm.
My background is entrepreneurship. I'm an entrepreneur. So, but I see that some fractional CMOs coming from more like structured big companies, corporate world, that sometimes they struggle with that transition. And especially for like smaller businesses and especially for like B2B businesses, what the founder in essence is really looking for is a partner because a lot of them are doing it by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when they hire you as the fractional CMO, they're really expecting to for you to come in and say, we can, like, let's collaborate, we can take it this way or that way, but just like the strategic partnership and the collaboration piece, and not just looking at the from my perspective anyways, not just looking at the marketing bubble, but helping them look at their business as a whole and what needs to be done in order for them to achieve their goals. So the entrepreneurship piece, I think, is something that's very, very important for fractional CMOs to have as well, to think like an entrepreneur, to think essentially like another duplicate that's a marketing expert, but a duplicate of the business owner themselves.
Mm-hmm. And Kent, what do you think? Someone starting out as a fractional CMO today probably would be surprised by what?
I will echo a little bit of what Rose said there. You do need to be an entrepreneur, have that mindset. I was blessed in my career to be an operational CFO and see how decisions as the marketing department made with the advertising and the tactics really affected each and every business unit within the organization. But specifically to your question, with regards to somebody becoming a fractional CMO, I will just say you need to be prepared that it's nonstop. When you're a fractional CMO, well, before you're fractional, when you are a CMO, you're dealing with a lot of A+ personalities. They're nonstop. They're up at the crack of dawn. They go to sleep thinking about business. So you're dealing with this executive team, but yet it's 3, 4 different people over and over again. When you become a fractional CFO, you have 3 or 4 people here, over here, over here, and over here. So you have to understand, how do I communicate effectively across the board? Because this guy over here doesn't necessarily want to know that you have a client over there. They don't want to know that. They're the only client in their minds.
Right.
And you have to respect that. So how do you treat each one of your clients as if they are the only client, but yet not go insane? And so you have to become effective in, how you communicate, when you communicate. Who do I need to train or work with a little bit harder to understand? I do have to have a life. I myself have a 17-year-old daughter who I'm very, much a part of her life. And so those are my times, but yet every other time, let's do it. During football games, I'm texting. This past Sunday, during football games, I was texting. I probably did 50, 75 different text messages with a number of different people on a Sunday afternoon. That's the life.
Yeah.
It's not always very, very structured as an employee.
Now, one of the things a little unusual about this podcast is that guests are not curated, which is to say, we allow guests to pick their own recording time and date, which means that when you end up with a co-guest, it's completely random who you end up with. And I like that. It's part of the energy of the podcast. But what we do now is we let the guests, who are, these two fractional CMOs who've sort of been, put together, ask each other a question. And you can ask each other a question about anything. Ask about clients, ask about marketing, how do you find new business, whatever you want. But Kent, if you're going to ask Rose, who you've been sort of like randomly like paired with, a question, what would the question be?
Gotcha. And I'm glad I get to ask the question first. So, Rose, here we go. But, I remember a pivotal moment in my marketing career that sort of changed my mindset on how I approach my marketing, and really how I deploy my advertising. And it was a conversation I had with one of my counterparts, actually a very good friend of mine, who is also a marketer. But it was this moment in this conversation we had in a hallway in a high rise building. But I just totally remember this pivotal moment, that made me shift my thinking a little bit. In your career, have you had one of those moments? And if so, um, what was it and what was so meaningful to you as a marketer and as an individual that sort of it shaped who you are today as a professional?
That's a great question. The first one that comes to mind is actually, um, it was a big aha moment, epiphany that started when I was running my branding agency. So when I was running the branding agency, it was again for B2B companies, and I did the traditional branding model that every other branding agency does, and you it would take months to figure to like finish like branding process for a branding projects for clients. And what ended up happening was that as my business was doing really well on paper, it was the opposite internally because we were so overwhelmed with incoming clients and like client work that I got burned out. My team was burned out and it just was not enjoyable anymore. So we were kind of like a victim to our own success in a way. And I realized, so it was like a 2 a.m. morning. I was trying to finish a client deliverable. And the other thing is like, I insisted at the time, I was such a perfectionist. I insisted on being involved in like every client project, which was a massive mistake. But anyways, more of the story. So I was working late night on a branding project and just completely burned out. And I thought, okay, so either I give up this business because it's not working. This is overwhelming and it doesn't fit like balance in my life, and I need to have a life. I have a life, or I figure out a way to fix this problem. So long story short, I took myself through the same process that I take my clients through to figure out root causes of the issue. And I brought in my corporate experience, which was that I was doing digital transformation and agile transformation, but I did it in the context of software development. So I've worked with hundreds of developers to transition companies to agile. And I thought, could this work for branding? Let's see, because with I know that agile fixed a lot of issues for for software teams. Could this work for branding as well? That to where it won't be this very bulky process that's drawn out for no particular reason. So I decided to try it, and it was a massive risk because I started telling my clients instead of months to do branding projects, it's going to take 2 weeks. That's what you get, and we focus on your project for 2 weeks. And to my surprise, they were like, perfect. We get our deliverables much sooner. Like, let's go, let's do it. And I didn't have to reduce my pricing, which was like another big aha moment for me. So when we went agile, it transformed everything in the business. Like things worked smoother. Our delivery results were better. Like the quality was better. Everything just worked better. And so since that moment, I realized that incorporating this mindset into everything I do goes such a long way. So I do agile marketing as well. So right now, that's the way that I work. So when I'm working on a campaign for clients, I use that same framework to structure the campaigns to where we're planning the campaigns every so often. So I do monthly sprints. So in the beginning of the month, we get the team together, the whole team together, figure out what is the goal for this month, what is our experiment, what are we going to test, and then at the end of the sprint, and during that sprint, we catch up on a regular basis to talk about how things are going and to it so that as problems arise, we can catch them in real time and address them in real time. And at the end of that sprint, we take a look at the numbers, we take a look at not just the numbers, but also how was the team structure, how did the team work together. So we can have this iterative way of improving very quickly so that it's not just months of long drawn out marketing plans and then you just go implement and you're not getting real-time feedback, but the team structure is there, the collaboration is there, and the experiments are also a lot more fun because every month the team is excited to come in and contribute to say, oh, what are we going to test this month? What are we going to experiment with? So I treat it like an experiment, like a science lab, basically. And that was like a big shift for me in my mindset. So whenever possible, I tackle pretty much everything with this mindset of experimentation and just fun and creating something that's iteratively going to be improving over time.
And Rose, what's your question for Kent?
Well, my question for you actually is AI. So I'm sure you've heard that a lot. And what I've been seeing is a lot of marketers are using and what I mean is large language models like ChatGPT or Claude have been using those things to either create content or just brainstorm. So what has been your experience with AI, and how do you see AI changing marketing, if at all, or what are your thoughts about how marketers should or should not be using AI?
So I have a friend of mine who is also a marketer, and he was the one who really I had a pivotal conversation with and shaped my marketing mind. This is going back probably 18 years ago. We had this conversation, but he and I get together every so often. He lives all over the United States. He works at a very, very high enterprise level. And so he's usually ahead of me with technology and something. So a couple of years ago, we got together and we're roaming the hallways at the Peterson Museum in Los Angeles. And I said, okay, what is the one thing you're focused on right now with your teams? And he said, Chat GPT. And I said, why Chat GPT? And he says, I make every one of my team members use Chat GPT, whether they're doing messaging, creating ads, visual ads, whatever. He says, I just have them run it through there once they've created it. And I said, why? Doesn't that, sort of just come out with, the same thing over and over? And he goes, no, it doesn't. And he goes, but also I found that the people that adopted it can handle more work and do it quicker. And he says, and we're able to come out with different variants and testing wise. So I've implemented it in my life, but the way I use it to create content is not necessarily to create the content. I, as a marketer, I need to pull together the fundamental pieces of the messaging that I want to provide out there for my client. And so I structure my messaging. Let's say I'm putting together some email marketing. So I want to get somebody's attention with our subject lines and our pre-headers. Then I want to draw them into the email and what are we offering, bring that through that educational process, get them a CTA and stuff. And I'll take those various elements and I'll stick it into ChatGPT and I'll say, okay, rewrite this for clarity, rewrite this for convincing. I will tell it what I want because I know that even though I'm pulling this structure together and I've been doing this for a long time, I don't know everything. So I want to get a little bit of input based on how I wrote things. And a lot of times what comes back, maybe, half of the time I'll say, wow, that just nailed it. And so I'll just cut and paste what it gave back to me. And then other times I'll take bits and pieces of it and then fold it into what I'm doing. But I use ChatGPT quite often. It's kind of like having that other person in the room that you can ask questions to and get back feedback from. You don't rely on it for your knowledge, your experience, your fundamentals of marketing, because then it really loses the exactness of what your client wants at the end of the day. It doesn't know those things. You just use it for little spot items is how I use it, but it's really helpful.
Hey Kent, so it's time to wind down. Who should be contacting you these days, and how should they do it?
Hmm. Anybody that sells a product direct to a consumer, that's my sweet spot and has been my sweet spot. And I've worked with a lot of different people over the years. I've worked with startup companies, regardless of what the product is. I've worked with very large branding companies such as Schwann's Home Services,
Mm-hmm.
Omaha Steaks, Hoover, Dirt Devil. I mean, very large brands. I also launched the Tracy Anderson Metamorphosis campaign back in the day. So I bring those out because you may know these brands, and none of those two brands are really similar in what their product is. And I'm that harbor pilot that jumps on your giant ship, and I bring it through the port of direct to consumer marketing and advertising. And I'm the expert in marketing and advertising in a direct to consumer performance marketing manner. And so anybody that's selling a product, online, television, radio, digital, you name it. Those are the type of clients that we have great encounters with. And they can reach me by going to my website, kentmora.com, or they can reach me at 949-230-6942.
Hmm. Phone number on the internet. Brave.
Yeah, yeah.
And Rose, how about you? Who should be contacting you these days and how?
So I work with B2B professional services businesses that
Mhm.
are um, small to mid-size. So they're at least a million plus in revenue, and they're trying to get to that next level. And I also work with SaaS companies, B2B SaaS companies as well. So software companies that are trying to reach small businesses, mid-sized businesses, and even corporate as well. So those were the sweet spots for me. I've worked a lot with service-based businesses, so a lot of accounting firms, ERP providers, so the businesses that provide professional services to other businesses are my areas of expertise. And the best way to reach me is actually through LinkedIn. You can find me by just typing in my name. There aren't too many of us in the world with that name, so you can easily find me, Rose Desauguste, on LinkedIn, or by sending me an email, which is hello@nectardx.com.
All right, guys. Thanks so much. These you guys gave like complete and thorough answers, and I learned a lot from this. I bet everyone who watches the clips or the full episode are going to learn a lot too. All right, so thanks, Kent, and thank you, Rose. Nice to see you guys again, and thanks for watching. This was episode 128, I think, and